Little Briar-Rose, written by the Brothers Grimm, adapted by Jill Wronski, illustrated by Laurel Varian. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, a king and queen longed for a child. One day, as the queen sat by a pond, a frog emerged from the water and said, "Before the year ends, you will have a daughter." The queen smiled and hoped what the frog said was true. Soon the king and queen had a little girl, whom they named Princess Briar-Rose. The king was so overjoyed by Briar-Rose's arrival that he held a great banquet in her honor. He invited family, friends, and 12 fairies to the celebration. All the fairies had multicolored wings and gowns. After the feast, each fairy presented Briar-Rose with special gifts. The pink fairy gave the princess beauty, the purple fairy gave her kindness, the orange fairy gave her wisdom, and so on. Before the yellow fairy could give her final blessing, a 13th fairy appeared. The black fairy had not been invited to the celebration because, unlike the other fairies, she was not very kind. Now she was also unhappy because she did not receive an invitation. On Princess Briar-Rose's 18th birthday, she will touch a spinning wheel and fall asleep forever, the black fairy announced and vanished in a cloud of smoke. The king, queen, and guests were shocked. "Don't worry," said the yellow fairy. "Instead of sleeping forever," she said, "Briar-Rose will awaken after 100 years. While the king and queen were thankful for the yellow fairy's blessing, they wanted to keep Briar-Rose safe. They ordered all the spinning wheels in the kingdom to be burned. Years passed, and Briar-Rose grew into a lovely young woman with the fairies' gifts. She was good and kind and adored by everyone who met her. When she turned 18, the king and queen went out on a day trip, and Briar-Rose spent the day exploring her home, the castle. Briar-Rose discovered many hidden rooms and secret staircases. One narrow, winding staircase led to a high, quiet tower. Briar-Rose reached the top of the stairs and found a locked door with a rusty key. Curious, the princess opened the door and peered into a tiny bedroom. The black fairy, dressed as an old woman, sat in the middle of the room spinning wool on a glittering golden wheel. Every other wheel had been burned years ago, but the black fairy had made a special one to trick Briar-Rose. Briar-Rose did not recognize her and greeted the fairy with a smile. "Good day. What is that cheerful-looking machine?" the princess asked. "May I help you?" The black fairy nodded, and Briar-Rose touched the shining spinning wheel. As soon as she did, Briar-Rose's eyes closed, and she fell into a deep sleep on the bed in the corner. The black fairy, satisfied that the curse was complete, vanished along with the spinning wheel. Briar-Rose was not the only one who slept. The whole castle was under the black fairy's spell. The newly returned king and queen, the flies on the wall, the birds in the trees, and the cook in the kitchen fell asleep. Even the wind stopped. While the castle slept, a great green wall of branches and ivy grew around it. Every year, the wall reached higher and higher until even the tower in which Briar-Rose slept was hidden. Briar-Rose was not the only one who slept. Many years passed, and the story of Briar-Rose's enchantment spread throughout the land. Sometimes brave princes journeyed to the castle and tried to break through the wall of branches. No one ever could, though, since the wall was too solid and deep. 100 years later, on the day the spell lifted, a handsome prince named Henry came to the castle. His grandfather had told him the story of Briar-Rose, and Henry was sure he could rescue the princess himself. When he arrived, the wall of ivy and branches had become large red roses. The flowers parted as he passed and closed behind him. On the other side, Henry found the animals asleep in the yard. In the castle, Henry found the king and queen asleep on their thrones. The servants were asleep in the great hall. The rooms were so quiet Henry could hear himself breathing. Soon he found the secret staircase to the tower. Henry went up the stairs and into the little room at the top. Briar-Rose was still asleep, and Henry's heart was struck by how beautiful she was. He could not look away and kissed her. As soon as he did, Briar-Rose's eyes opened and she smiled up at him. He told her he loved her and brought her downstairs where everyone was awakening. The flies began to buzz and the birds fluttered their wings and flew off. The king and queen welcomed Briar-Rose with open arms and celebrated the end of the curse. The black fairy never bothered them again. Sometime later, Henry and Briar-Rose married in a lavish ceremony and lived happily ever after.